Hello guys, my name is Zaki Shihab Hatmoko, and in this video I will present to you about IT audit paper summary. There will be 5 paper titles that will be discussed in this video. The first one is the role of IT audit in the era of digital transformation by B.R. Aditya, R. Hartanto, and L.E. Nugroho, published in 2018. Second, IT audit guidance side-by-side comparison, also by B.R. Aditya and Y. Menzelsi, published in 2019. The third, a review on information system audit using COVID framework by H. Nugroho, published in 2019. Fourth, the effect of IT audit on security incidents by A. Salihu and X. Berishahouti, published in 2019. And then the last one, information system security analysis of XYZ company using COVID-5 framework and ISO 27001 2013 by G.G. Prepanan and G.C. Pamuji, published in 2020. First of all, almost all of the paper that being discussed here have the same introduction. That is, the digital era has brought many changes, be it opportunities or risks. It also become business enabler instead of supporter like before. And this is where IT audit profession emerged. Okay, then let's move on to the first paper with the title The Role of IT Audit in the Era of Digital Transformation by B.R. Aditya, R. Hartanto, and L.E. Nugroho, published in 2018. First here, roles of IT audit will vary between companies. Why? It's answered in the number 2. The roles of IT audit are determined by IT audit universe and characteristic. And then IT audit universe. What determines the IT audit universe? The IT audit universe is determined by how much value and risk of the IT company. Company can define IT audit universe using their own frameworks based on their current needs, or it can also define IT audit universe based on existing IT audit frameworks. According to the Institute of Internal Auditors in 2013, IT audit universe can be defined based on 4 aspects as follows. First, IT management, a collection of people, policies, procedures, and processes that govern the IT environment, such as software development lifecycle, system monitoring, IT planning, change management, vendor management, IT project management, disaster recovery, service management, security management, and IT governance. Second, technical infrastructure, the underlying technology in supporting major applications for business, such as operating systems, database management systems, networks, data centers, and security infrastructures. Third, application, computer programs that perform specific tasks related to the business operation of the company and become an integral part of business processes, such as transactional applications and support applications. Fourth, external networks. External network connected to an operational network. The operational network will not operate if it's not connected to the external networks, such as the internet, cloud computing, and software as a service provider. IT audit characteristics. IT audit characteristic will determine the success of the role of IT audit, and it is closely related to IT audit universe, which means that any IT audit universe will have different IT audit characteristics. Generally, the definition of IT audit characteristic can refer to 3 key elements as follows. The first one, resources. The availability of resources related to IT audit practices, such as a number of IT auditors, IT audit budgets, tools and techniques, theories and methodologies, and standards or frameworks. Second, competencies. The skills or capabilities of the internal audit department related to IT audits, such as the maturity of the IA organization, experience, interpersonal skills, knowledge, number of hours the IT auditor, and number of IT auditors who have certified. Then third, interaction with Board of Directors Committee. How interaction between internal audit department and audit committee related to IT audits, such as structure. The changing role of IT audit. Originally, the role of IT audit is done by using traditional approach, which is compliance-oriented IT audit, with a focus on analyzing and disclosing past practices. However, nowadays the approach has been abandoned and shifted toward modern IT audit. The modern approach is more risk-oriented to the risk that can be obstacle toward improving company's business performance, and they focus on the future instead the past ones. Determining the roles of IT audit. Conclusion. Thus, to determine the role of IT audit in the era of digital transformation, there are two key elements that must be considered to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the IT audit practices. First, define IT audit universe based on IT value and risk for business. Second, identify the characteristics of the existing IT audit in the company, as well as the effort to fulfill the gap on the IT audit characteristics required by each IT audit universe. Now let's move on to the second paper, IT Audit Guidance Side-by-Side Comparison by B.R. Aditya and Y. Minzels, published in 2019. The IT Audit Guidance is a guideline for a systematic IT audit process to assist the process of data collection and technical process. There is many IT audit guidance with different forms that can be used by IT audit auditor. The main objective of using an IT audit guidance is to get value from the implementation of the IT audit. The value can be vary, such as form of accountability, saving the audit costs, and efficiency of IT audit process, and better identification of IT risks. Particularly, IT audit guidance can be used to determine the IT audit universe. In recent years, IT audit guidance is still an important issue for IT auditor because they still have trouble determining the right IT audit guidance that will be used. There are still several things that can cause mistakes in determining IT audit guidance. First, they do not understand the scope of IT guidance. Second, they do not carry out mapping between the objectives of IT audit and IT audit guidance. Third, they do not adjust the application of the IT audit guidance according to the needs of IT audit. Therefore, the general guidance is needed to help IT auditor in choosing IT audit guidance. IT audit guidance. There are 8 IT guidance that is relevant for IT audit and has been accepted globally. First is ITAF, second GTAC, third Information System Audit and Assurance Guidance, fourth IT Assurance Guide using COVID, fifth ISO 27007 and ISO TR 27008. The next TSP, 7 ISO 20000, and the last one is ITIL. In more detail are explained as follows. IT audit and assurance, the initial knowledge in implementing IT audit. In this guidance, there are 17 standards, 18 guidelines, and 5 tools and techniques, which are grouped into 3 groups, namely general, performance, and reporting. We can see the table below. This is the table of the scope of IT AF. There are standards, guidelines, and tools which are grouped into three groups. There are general, performance, and reporting. The difference between standards and guidelines lies in the performance. The guidelines have sampling method, but the standards doesn't have it. And then the next one is GTech scope. They provide practical guidance for IT auditor in understanding technology and other needs related to IT audit. There are currently 17 guides with different focus areas, which are created by combining concepts and practical guidelines. In this guidance, the focus area is divided into three parts. They are audit different areas of IT, auditing IT security, and auditing technology and concept. And then information system audit and assurance guidance. They provide educational resources about how to manage and conduct IT audit in the context of specific business. Currently, there are 54 audit programs with the distribution of the focus areas based on the version of COVID 5 and COVID 4.1. Next is IT assurance guide using COVID. They provide guidance on the planning process, determining of scope, and initiation of the implementing of IT assurance based on COVID. This guide is used to help IT organization in evaluating COVID implementation. And then ISO 27007, they provide guidance for specific IT audit information security management system or ISMS. This ISO focuses on management system based on ISMS at ISO 27001, while ISO TR 27008 focus on information security controls based on ISO 27002. As for ISO 27007, focus are grouped into three. They are managing the ISMS audit program, performing an ISMS audit, and managing ISMS auditor. Next is trust service criteria. They provide reports related to how internal controls is carried out by the service provider, excluding financial reporting. The trust service category is divided into five categories. They are security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. Currently, the TSP has 61 criteria for all categories. And then the last two, ISO 20000 and ITIL. They provide guidance on managing IT services. ISO 20000 is standard and ITIL is a practical set. Both are aimed to align IT services with business needs and overall management of IT services, be it configuration management, capacity management, release management, supplier management, application management, and management of continuity of IT services, including the processes needed to design, implement, test, and maintain IT process. Based on the discussion of the side-by-side comparison, the relevance of each IT audit guidance can be seen in table below. First, ITAF has very high relevance, and then followed by GTech, also very high. And then the third one is audit programs, the level of relevance is very high. Next is COVID is high, and then ISO 27007 and ISO TR 27008 is high. Then TSP section 100 is high. And then ISO 20000 and ITIL is very low of relevance. And finally, the conclusion. Thus, to determine IT audit guidance, there are several things that should be considered by IT auditor. First is IT audit needs. The IT auditor does not need to use IT audit guidance if the objective of IT audit can be achieved only by using policies, process, and procedures owned by the company. Second, the scope of IT audit guidance. The IT auditor must be aware of the scope of IT audit guidance, whether to use for a general issue, for example about IT governance frameworks, or for a specific issue, for example about web application security. Third, adjustment to IT audit guidance. The IT auditor can integrate several parts of different IT audit guidance to make customization to the IT audit objectives. Fourth, recommendation from other parties. The IT auditor must understand the reason when deciding to implement certain IT audit guidance based on recommendation from other parties. The third paper is a review on information system audit using COVID framework by Heru Nugroho, published in 2019. One of the widely used IT audit framework is COVID, or Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology. COVID is a detailed resource that consists of all the information organizations must be compelled to adopt its governance and control framework. COVID optimizes investment that support IT and ensure that IT successfully meets business requirements. A review on IT or IS audit. Information System or IS audit within the COVID framework is commonly referred as IT assurance. It is not only able to give an evaluation of the state of IT governance but also provide feedback that can be used to improve management. The COVID 4.1 guidebook describes the relationship between components in the COVID framework, as in figure below. In the figure of the previous slide, the IT audit is done to assess whether IT processes have done to support the objectives of IT by taking control of the resulting outcome. The outcome is derived based on the control objective of each method. Some of the paper with the title Information System in a Journal or Proceeding, but the content is different. The differences are grouped into two categories: paper with the title IS Audit, but the content discuss the maturity or capability level. Also, paper with the title IS Audit and content discuss the process of IS Audit. If we look to the relationship of component in COVID, the IS Audit is different from the maturity or capability level. The maturity or capability level is a part of the process in the IS audit with the goal to provide awareness on IT management about responsibility for the control of IT, to ensure compliance with control requirements that have been set, optimize and prioritize IT resources, and bridging for IT governance. And then the audit process will be retrieved in several findings that can be used by organizations or companies. It will also improve the related findings that could be the cause of why IT goal wasn't achieved, while the maturity or capability level generated a value that describes the position of IT to support the business process of the organization. The author conducted a literature research of 20 random scientific papers with the title of Information System Audit. Only 3 papers, or about 15%, that have the title of IS Audit and discuss the process of IS Audit and distinguish the audit with maturity or capability level. The remaining 17 papers, or about 85%, discussed the maturity or capability level without any discussion related to the audit process. This fact shows us that there are still differences in the presentation of scientific papers relating to the auditing information system. Finally, the conclusion. Thus, there are still many misconceptions with maturity or capability level and the IT or IS audit process. The maturity or capability level is actually one of the stages during the IT audit using COVID framework and should be distinguished with the actual COVID framework. The fourth paper, The Effect of IT Audit on Security Incidents by Armen Salihu and Shamil Berisha Houti, published in 2019. This paper shows us the importance of IT audit like the previous paper titled The Role of IT Audit in the Era of Digital Transformation. But in this paper, it shows us the field research about the impact of IT audit in reducing security incidents. The author conducted research for 4 years from 2015 until 2018 in 10 different organizations. They looked at the total number of implemented recommendations given in the field of IS have been implemented by organization, whereas to establish connection that the implementation recommendations in the field of IS has an impact on the reduction of security incidents. They have taken the total number of security incidents from which they have noticed that every year there has been a decrease in number of security incidents. Below is a table of given recommendation, implemented recommendation, and the security incidents in 2015 until 2016. And then this is the security incidents table on 2017 until 2018. From the presented data, it can be seen that implementation of recommendation has positively impacted on the reduction of security incidents and has had a positive effect on improving the organization system and information security. Not just doing observation, for this research, the author also conducted interviews or questionnaires with the organization's managers, as well as heads of information technology units, information security officers, and IT auditors. 7 different questions regarding the impact of IT audit on these interviews were presented. First, when asked whether the internal IT audit adds value, they received a positive response from all the interviewed parties. Second, when asked whether the implementation of internal audit recommendation of the IT field has affected the organization's protection from security incidents, they received a positive response from all the interviewed parties. Third, when asked whether internal IT audit has impact on improving IT business process, they receive a positive response from all respondents, with little concern from IT managers that some additional control procedures could affect human resources. Fourth, when asked whether the areas covered by the IT auditor who did not detect any deficiencies, whether there were any security incidents, they received a negative response from all interviewed parties, where in the areas addressed by the IT auditor, there were no cyber attacks and security incidents identified. Fifth, when asked whether the implementation of IT auditors' recommendations to reduce security incidents had an impact, They received a positive response from all interviewed parties, where implementation of the recommendations of the internal auditor in the IT field, there was a very high impact on reducing security incidents. Sixth, when asked if the findings identified by the external auditor of IT the same were previously identified by the internal auditor of IT, they got the answer that all important issues are identified by the internal auditor of IT on time. Then the last one, while the questions as to which audits are most effective, those of the IT internal auditor or external auditor, the organization's managers, the heads of IT units, and the information security officer, they had response that internal audits are more effective, and from this question are excluded internal IT auditors. The conclusion of this paper. Thus, IT audit is very important and must have role for each company to be able to adapt and compete in this digital era. The author of this paper has shown us that implementing IT audit recommendation can reduce the number of security incidents, which is a very good thing for company to reconsider of having IT audit in their company. Finally, the last paper, Information System Security Analysis of XYZ Company using COVID-5 Framework and ISO 27001 2013 by Gigi Prapadan and G.C. Pamunji, published in 2020. Nowadays, the security of information systems is very important to prevent cyber attack. Besides that, security can hinder the productivity of a company. In this case, XYZ Company, a company that produces a variety of fabrics, want to improve the information security of their company. Before doing that, the author needs to find out the ISMS that has been fulfilled with COVID-5 and ISO 27001 in information technology security aspect. After performing the required tests using COVID-5 and ISO 27001, they got the results of internal audits involving APO 12, DSS 05, MEA 02, and EDM 03. Recommendations can be taken to improve the ISMS that confirms the standard, thus that capability levels can be increased. For APO 12, MEA 02, and EDM 03, processes are at level 2, but little is achieved. For full achievement at level 2, the company as follows: implementing, making plans, monitoring, and establishing precise controls regarding to the information security management system. Thus, to measure the extent of the process that has been achieved based on testing and feedback from users as well as attachment related to information security management system, thus that the information security management system can be well managed. Similar to the previous approach, for the DSS-05 process, it can be upgraded to level 2 by achieving the following criteria. First, implementation, making plans, monitoring, and establishing controls regarding to the management of information system security and evaluating the results of implementation. From there, it can measure the process that has been achieved based on feedback from the user and the results of existing data. Thus, it can be more aligned with the management information system security by conducting qualitative analysis. The recommendation from previous slide for each process are carried out to improve the information security management system based on COVID-5 PAM, which is aligned with ISO 27001, selected according to company requirements for Level 2 Capability Index. If a company is planning to get an ISO certificate, previously the company must improve the level in accordance with ISO 27001 standards. After that, it can be made and asked to get an ISO certificate. If not, then the company can plan to reach the next level according to the indicators chosen regarding to the ISMS. And then the conclusion. Based on the results of the first audit process regarding ISMS system using COVID-5 and ISO 27001 2013 on XYZ company that have performed process level 1 on the SSO5 process and APO 12, MEAO 2, and EDMO 3 only slightly reached the target but included managed process level 2 based on a predetermined scope before the auditor performs an internal audit and the auditor set on the target for the first time an audit of this company at level 3 for each selected COVID-5 process. Thank you for watching. See you next time.